going back to the pharmacy or the photomat or wherever you want, dropping it off, waiting a week, coming back, opening it up to see 12 pictures with your finger over the lens. Come on, I can't be the only one that admits it. I got people willingly admitting it. Now, where are those today? Kodak,
Gone.
Polaroid, they're gone. Why are they gone? Digital transformation, the digital journey, and they did not adapt and move along. Now, when we think about those two companies, think about all the supporting organizations that went along with it. Now, these are extremes, but I guarantee if you start thinking back to toy companies, think about all the toy companies. How many of your kids play with Legos anymore? I mean, we play with erector sets, right? And when you get really old, I'm not going to go how old I am, we had blocks. Kids don't play with that anymore. They use digital tools, they use things. The entire market, whether you're talking about toys, whether you're talking about the film industry, they don't use film anymore. Everything's done digital. It's evolved. We have to evolve with it or die. So when we start thinking about the space about how do you survive, the first important thing is you have to deal with the source of truth. The source of truth in our world is data in motion. I'm not as focused as data at rest. I'm not a DLP guy. I'm not worried about where your IP is stored. I'm worried about where your IP is moving. So when I start thinking about that, I have to start thinking about the network. And I'm sorry I don't have the clicker, so I have to keep walking back here. I know, high tech, and I didn't have one. So if we look at a network nowadays, this is a simplistic form of a network. Does this resonate? Everybody kind of look at this and go, yeah, that's my network? Right? Can you guys all agree? I got a few heads? No? Really?
Eye chart.
Eye chart? Well, we got a couple feeds coming into some firewalls, going off to some routers, going off to some spine switches, which go off to some leafs. That's pretty traditional. Then we got to put a bunch of tools on it. So this is what it looks like when we get done. A bunch of tools connected to a bunch of different points. Now here's what's interesting. There was a survey done of a bunch of CISOs. They asked the CISOs, what are your biggest fears? The old question, what keeps you awake at night? How many of you guys think it had to do with malware? How many of you think it had to do with staffing? It wasn't. This is what kept them awake. My network is too complex, my staff can't manage it, I don't know what's going on. I need help to simplify it. And that's what we're here to talk about today. How do I make my life better? So first thing we're going to talk about is span ports. Is there anybody in this room that really thinks they got a handle on what's the difference between a span and a tap? Not a hand. All right? Because I was going to ask if you raised your hand, I'm going to call you a liar. But that's okay. Come on, I got to have fun. I'm here. All right. So let's kind of talk about a span. A span port was built in the 90s, just when switching came out, because if we think about the old rules of hubs, you have one giant collision domain. Switches came in and they said, oh, we're going to create separate collision domains. So if I've got, for example, I'm sorry, sir, what was your name?
Frank.
Frank is talking to? Dominic. Frank is talking to Dominic and I have nothing to do with that conversation and they're on a switch. Am I even going to hear their conversation? No. The only way I'm going to hear it is to take a mirrored copy of it and send it over. So on a simplistic diagram, I've got a device, I got Frank on one side, I got Dominic on the other, and Frank says something to Dominic, and a copy of it gets sent down the span port. But here's the problem. We really don't have Frank only talking to Dominic, we have Dominic at the same time talking to Frank. So I have traffic going both ways. And if I need a mirror copy of it, unless they're both talking one at a time, I'm never going to get all the traffic. That's what the switch world lives with. If we think about full duplex, which is what I'm talking about, if I got a gig going this way and a gig going this way, but I only got one gig coming out, can I get all the traffic? Is it possible? No, it's not possible. So when we think about a span, we are guaranteed going to get drop traffic. But ultimately, that's because it's done in software. So while span ports have a use, they're portions of the traffic. It's not all the traffic. Come along something called a tap, a test access point. It's dedicated, it's hardware. The difference is really pretty simple. Instead of one line coming out, there's two. So I can hear everything that Frank's saying, I can hear everything that Dominic's saying on 2 separate channels. That's a tap. Now why does this matter? It matters because we're security folks. And if we have tools, all those vendors out there and back there that are talking about tools, then I need to get all the data in so I can do aggregation. I got Splunk back there. I'm not trying to pick on anybody, but I got all these different tools back here that say, give me the data. A tap gives them 100% of the data, which means they can make better decisions and give you better fidelity on it. And ultimately, a tap is hardware, it's not software, which means you get 100%. The other piece that we always get is, what's the difference between inline and out-of-band tools? The main difference here is, are you going to take action on it or just look at it? What do I mean by that? If I've got a user down here trying to talk to a server, and they're going through a fabric, which we are the visibility fabric, and I just want to make a copy of it and send it to a tool, that would be out of band. But if I want to do something, inspect the traffic in real time, if I want to do an IPS, and the IPS wants to look at the traffic, sessionize it, and make a decision on whether or not I'm going to let that traffic go, that means it's in line. So it may do session resets, it may do something with the traffic, it may block the traffic. But here's a problem. If I have an inline tool, and I connect it directly to my network, what happens to my network if that inline tool goes down?
Traffic stops.
I'm sorry?
Traffic stops.
Traffic stops. My network goes down. So here's where we start getting at odds. How many people in this room are network guys and gals?
Sure.
A lot of you, right? All you care about is, I need my network to be up.
Yes.
How many people in this room are security folks? What's the most secure network in the world? One that's unplugged. You see it on here? You see the problem? Right? So we definitely have a reason that we need to worry about this. So if I'm a security guy and I need my inline tool, I need it to be on the network. If I'm a network guy, I don't want your inline tool on my network because it's going to bring my network down. So we start looking at it, we start looking at what we do, and I'm saying we in general, GIGAMON of course, but in our space, when we look at TAPS, aggregation, packet broker, we allow you to move that inline tool off directly being in the network, leaving us in line, because we're designed to deal with outages and not affect the network, and allow folks like this that wants his inline tool security guy to still be on the network and not piss off the rest of the people in this room that are saying, get your stuff off my network. That's where we get at odds. So let's talk about what is an aggregator. So we talked about that network early on where I had inline tools and I have taps at different places on my network and I bring it all in. What do I do with all those points? Because, I'm sorry, what was your name?
David.
David has a bunch of tools. David needs to get his tools fed to the network. If I've got a bunch of tap points and I try to feed David, is he going to be able to take 6 or 8 points of egress into his tools? Probably not. His tool isn't going to support 6 or 8 feeds. So what an aggregator does is allows us to take all these points of entry of data in, aggregate it into a common place, and then allow him to connect David's tools into different ports and route the appropriate traffic to the appropriate tool. What do I mean by that? How many of you do web analysis through web application firewalls or web performance monitoring? Not enough hands. I got a couple. Well, do you really need email traffic going to your web analyzer? Probably not. An aggregator can filter that out. If I'm doing email analysis, do I really want web traffic? Probably not. Let's filter it out. So that's when we look at aggregators. It's a many-to-one or many-to-many or one-to-many relationship that allows you to move the packets. You can't do it without an aggregator. It's just not possible. You can look at some of the advanced firewalls. We've got some advanced firewall companies in the room. They work with aggregators and packet brokers like us to get those packets to the right place, to the right tools. The other thing is that we don't want to bring the network down when we make a change to a network tool. This is how you do it. All right? When we move up the food chain, excuse me, we move into packet brokers. The simplest way to determine the difference between a packet broker and an aggregator is the intelligence behind it, the smarts. Am I going to manipulate the traffic in any way, or am I just going to pass traffic? If I'm just passing traffic, and it's done in silicon, that's a broker. If I need to manipulate the traffic in any way, I need an engine, and I need software and smarts to do it. I'm going to cover what that means in a minute. Just so you know, packet brokers come in many different shapes and sizes, from small, medium, and very large. So it's important to understand the differences have to do with feeds and speeds and horsepower. What's the backplane? What type of processing power do I need? Am I going to do TLS SSL decryption in the middle? These are all questions that you want to ask when you start looking in this space. So the whole point here was when we looked at that network before, all that stuff was connected. When you start looking at aggregators and packet brokers, it's about you connect all your feeds into the visibility framework, which is your aggregator packet broker, and then connect your tools to it. It really solves the problem of the conflict of interest between the security folks, which basically would rather just unplug everything and say, I'm going home, versus the network folks that really want to kick the security guys out of the data center because they're impacting their network. This is how you solve that. That's the common ground. And so the reality is, let's leverage all the functionality of the packet brokers and the aggregators. So let's kind of get into what do these things really do. First and foremost, this is this is a little bit more on the GIGAMON side, but it's more about the technology in our conversation today. But first and foremost, you need to make sure that you have a management platform for your aggregator packet broker. It's got to be, you can do command line, but we really don't want that because you're talking about visualizing the traffic. So you want to make sure whichever your management and orchestration has the ability to do APIs. Why? How many of you have SOAR tools in here? Nobody? Really? Okay, I saw I got one hand, thank you. That was a pity hand, thank you, I'll take it. But you guys not familiar with SOAR? It's automation for your security orchestration and remediation. So it's automation. So if you see something happening, and you have something happening on a network segment, and you want to say, I need to capture all the traffic from that segment because something bad is happening, you need to make sure you have APIs and automation that can automatically trigger, I need to capture all the traffic from that and send it to that tool. You want to make sure you have that. So open APIs that allow you to do that. When we start talking about the concept of across the bottom, where we talk about physical, where we're talking taps, aggregators, and brokers, we can't forget about the virtual space. All the capabilities that you need to do in the physical have to exist in the virtual, because I would be willing to bet you, and I'm not going to get any hands because it seems like you guys don't care. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. But the point is that how many of you guys have VM environments? Hey, that was all pity hands. I'll take it. But the point is everything I need my visibility in my physical, I still have to solve that problem in the virtual. Because if I have server-to-server communication, if I have lateral movement from one server to another, and it's not touching the wire, never going to see it. So all the capabilities we're talking about with tap and aggregation have to exist in your virtual. How many of you are living in the cloud right now? AWS, Azure, I've got a few hands. How are you dealing with that? So again, you need to make sure that this single pane of glass management not only deals with your physical, but it deals with your virtual, ESS and SX. It deals with your private cloud through OpenStack. It deals with Azure, AWS, Google Cloud, SAP, IBM, Nutanix. All of these from a single pane of glass view. Why? Because he's invested in a set of tools and he wants to use the same set of tools and get the most he can for his return on investment across all platforms. And I'm not pitching GIGAMON in this, I'm pitching the technology. The concept of network visibility, because you can't see it and you don't know what's happening. All right? So when we talk about the core stuff, what does an aggregator do? First and foremost, flow mapping. We talked about the fact that we want email traffic going to email tools. We want web traffic going to web tools, right? Or I want all packets going to full packet capture. You need to make sure you have the ability to send the right traffic to the right tool, get your best return on investment. I don't want a tool doing deep packet inspection and sessionizing and throwing away 80% of the traffic because that's just a waste of horsepower on an expensive tool. I want better fidelity. How many of you guys have Netflix running on your network? Oh, come on. Really? I got some guy shaking his head now. I bet you 20 bucks you got somebody running Netflix on your network. The point is if you've got tools that's doing network analysis, you really want to be doing it on Netflix traffic. This is where that comes in. If I can flow map and dump the stuff I don't care about, I get better return on my investment. If we've got things like load balancing of my tools. If I have a couple WAFs running, I want to load balance my tools. That's all done in silicon. That's all done at the hardware level. But as soon as I start getting into a packet broker, and I start looking at, I want to make sure I'm doing on time, a few more minutes. I want to make sure that I have the ability, first of all, deduplication. If I have a tool, and I've got an alert, do I want to see that alert 3 and 4 times because it traverses my network? No, I want to get rid of it. I only want to deal with it once. I need to get, if I've got somebody, I'm sorry, ma'am, what is your name?
Jana.
What is it?
Jana.
Jana?
Jana.
Jana is a threat analyst, and she sees the alert. I don't know if you already are, but today you are. You're a threat analyst, you see an alert, and then you see the same alert 3 times because it happened at 3 different points in your network. You're just going to want to just get a cup of coffee and just walk away. But if we can do data deduplication, so you only, yeah, it may have paused 3 different spots, but you only care about seeing it once and remediating one. Is it real or not? And if it is, I need to remediate it. Okay? But data deduplication is about making it so you only see it once. The next things we have is something called slicing and masking, and this is around compliance. How many of you are in the HIPAA business?
Sure.
All right, so you've got some medical people in the room that definitely are in the HIPAA business, but here's the problem. If you do packet capture on your network, guess what? You're in the HIPAA business. Because if I'm sitting there at my desk and I go to check my lab results, and you're capturing all my traffic, and I go in and look at my lab results, and guess what, folks? I tested positive for rabies. Don't sit too close if you see. I'll wipe it off. But I tested positive for rabies, and Jana's doing her analysis, and she's looking at something, and she sees, oh, what is this? Ooh, Jim tested positive for rabies. Hey, you'll never guess what Jim has, right? All of a sudden, guess what? HIPAA. We got a problem. You're not even in the HIPAA, but you're not in the medical business. You are now. So if we have the ability to take certain types of traffic and either dump the payload or obfuscate the payload, that matters. So compliance issues become really important, especially when you look at some of the identity practice folks we have in here. We can help you solve some of the compliance. SSL and TLS decryption. How many of you think that your online traffic is 60 to 70% encrypted? Really? Not that many hands? Probably higher. Next year it's going to be 90%. So you security folks in the room, what are you going to do with that? You can't see anything. Looks good to me. Right? I mean, that's what all you're going to be able to do. Looks good to me. Sorry, I got the 5 tuple. I got source, destination, and port. Look good. Right? Unless you start doing things like inline, SSL, TLS, you're never going to know. And we can help you there. And that's what these packet brokers do. So I'm limited on time. If you want to learn more about this stuff, please come over and let's talk about it. When we start talking about that virtual environments that we know most people have, this is what it looks like. I've got a bunch of VMs and I got a bunch of virtual tools living in my VMs. That's a lot of compute cycles and a lot of maintenance because I got to deal with multiple tools. We already know we want to use the tools that we have. We've got a lot of tool manufacturers here. Let's get the bang for our buck. Whether we're talking physical or virtual, what I really want to do is just use my virtual environments and virtually tap it and send it back to my physical and use my physical tools that all these vendors are providing. That's what's great about what we do. We work with all these different vendors. We're vendor agnostic, so we can provide the feeds and speeds. If you're talking cloud, on the left-hand side is what you have to do today. It looks kind of like that scary network. I got all these tools tapping in and loading agents on all my workloads. Stop it. It's a nightmare. Who wants to manage agents? I don't. Instead, what you should be able to do is do virtual tapping in the cloud, whether you're talking Amazon or AWS, and manage it from a single console and use the tools that you already have. If we're talking things like Docker containers, anybody here playing with Docker yet? I got a couple hands, that's good. How are you even knowing what's going on inside that container?